So in this video we're going to talk about why we need loops, when to use for versus while, we'll talk about the syntax of a for loop, and then we will write a loop to repeat the game so that at the end of it we can have 5 separate plays of the game with a little bit nicer spacing without having to write our function call 5 times. So let's get on with it. So it's all very well writing something twice, but 3 times is no good, and we want to have at least a handful of guesses. In fact, later on, the number of guesses is going to depend upon the size of the word. So we need to do something called looping. So far, everything we've done has been straight line code, effectively. It's just been straight line code in statements. Whether or not they've been inside functions or not is just a way of organizing them, but it's just a straight sequence through. So we're introducing the second fundamental way of writing code now, which is looping, or called iteration. Between straight line code, iteration, and branching or conditionals, we will be able to do everything. And then beyond that is just icing. Anyway, so this is the second one, is iteration. So there are 2 types of loops. One is called for and one is called while. We're going to concern ourselves with for the moment. How do we know when to use each? Well, they can both do exactly the same thing. They can be converted to one another. So let's pick a standard to keep ourselves sane. I'm going to go with this. When you know what you're in for, you know at compile time how many times it's going to loop, then let's use for. And when you may be looping for a while, you're not sure how many times it will loop until the program actually runs, then we'd use a while loop. So we're going to start off with this user input using a for, and we will actually convert it to a while later in the section when we start to deal with handling incorrect user input, because they don't want to be consuming a turn or a try if they put the wrong input. But for now, we're not checking their input, we're not validating anything. We're just going to take 5 guesses from them regardless. So we're going to use a for loop. So the syntax of a for loop is like this. For, open brackets, some initialization condition, you create yourself a variable. In fact, let me put the whole lot on the screen. It's going to be a lot easier. So the actual hard implementation is there at the bottom, and the top is the pattern for it. The pattern comes from c++.com. It's actually not a particularly precise definition of how a for loop works. You'll get a better one there at the Microsoft link. But anyway, let's talk through this guy. So for some initialization, so I'm going to create an integer counter, and I'm going to start it with a value of 1. So for int count equals 1, for example. Semicolon, it's just how it works. Then the condition. So the condition that you want to adhere to is that the count is less than or equal to some limit, for example, which may be 5 in our case. Then how do you increase the counter? Well, count plus plus. Count plus plus is a shorthand way of saying count equals count plus 1. It just adds 1 to the counter. And then the code you want to repeat. Now, the other interesting thing about this is they define it like this, statement, and I've put code blocks because generally we repeat more than one thing. And actually, this whole thing between these curly braces is a statement. Remember, we were saying before that another way of finishing off a statement is to close the curly braces. You see, so just start to get into your mind that a single statement is basically logically the same as far as something like for is concerned as a code block, i.e. a set of curly braces. Okay? Cool. So given that you know the syntax of the for loop, I think you're ready to wrap these guys in a for loop. So why don't you give that a crack? Here we go. Make the game take 5 guesses. What you've learned so far to make the game take 5 guesses in a row. Get guess should appear as a function call only once inside the for loop. So we not just keep copying and pasting the code. And as a bonus, remember what I said about magic numbers? Okay, pause the video, have a go at making this printout and ask for 5 guesses, and I'll see you soon. Oh, and be brave, just before you come back and watch my solution, why not take a screenshot and paste in the discussions the way you did it? Okay, welcome back. So let's take a look at how I'm going to do this. I said we only need 1 of these. So for, now the syntax. Let's immediately get all the structure in place. There we go. Okay, now we can change the way that Visual Basic does this, by the way, but I'm going to start working towards this standard with my braces. Okay, so for int count is very common, by the way, to use I. And I or J or K, they're okay. Excuse the pun. They're okay until you start getting confused and then you use something more complex. But for now, I'm going to use count because it's more descriptive. For int count equals 1, count is less than or equal to, now, 5, but that's a magic number. We'll replace that in a minute. Okay, count plus plus. Let's check it works, and then we'll deal with this magic number. Why is it a magic number? Well, because it's a number that's above 2, And it's in our code, so it's a magic number. Okay, let's have a look. It should ask us for 5 guesses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fantastic. Look, I want to space these guys out. I can't see what's going on. So I'm going to get guess and print back. I'm also going to then see out an end line myself after every one of those, just to space it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fantastic. 5. We actually have some code running. Great. Now, don't like this. Magic number, naughty, naughty. So what are we going to do about that? Well, what did we do about it before is the question. Before, we defined a constant expression of type integer, and we called it word length and made it 9. Well, let's do a very similar thing here. What needs it? The for loop. So we may as well put it right above the for loop. It's no longer called word length, but it's, I don't know, what do we call it? Number of turns, something like that? Yeah. It's long, but you only have to type it once, remember, and it saves you typing a comment, doesn't it? Number of turns equals 5, and now the reason I say you only have to write it once is because as soon as you start typing it again, it auto-completes. Cool. So we have a constant expression because it's known at compile time. It's an integer, number of turns 5. There it is. So our main thing prints the intro. Now, I need another comment. In fact, I'm a little naughty. I should have put a comment before I even started writing anything, but that's okay. Catch yourself and just do it. So loop for the number of turns asking for guesses. Now, it's not verified. It's not verifying any of these guesses or anything, but that's fine. So our main method still looks digestible. Gets any more complicated than this? We'll continue to refactor it out, like we could take this slot out. Okay, but let's just check it works. Oh, I hit that key very loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't spell 4, 5. Okay, great. We get an extra space here. We'll worry about all that type of stuff later. Great. So we're doing pretty well. Let me just look through my code before we leave this video and make things consistent. So we come in, we print the intro, we loop around, put an extra space in, which we actually don't even need anymore. I think I can get rid of it because it's reliably going to print a space here. And then the print intro is something that introduces the game. I'm going to change to the syntax we're aiming for with the braces like that. Okay. Okay, our code is looking all right. It's looking all right. Fantastic. So I don't really like the way these comments work here, so I'm just going to put that comment back. It's fine to just keep fiddling with your code until you like the look of it. Don't really need to explain this silly named method, especially if we're going to change it a bit later on. Print intro. Good. Okay, so I'm looking at the code and just making sure it's all indented sensibly and that it just reads well and makes sense. Do that regularly. Keep your code tight and tidy. You want to be having plenty of mental bandwidth for when things go wrong. You don't want to struggle to understand your own code. Okay, final check of running it. Great. See you in the next video.